We're almost ready to proceed. If I could just ask if anyone in Councillor Fletcher's office can hear my voice, could you please remind Councillor Fletcher we're ready to reconvene. Okay. Councillor, how are you? Okay. So I call the meeting to order. We're still waiting on a piece of paper for an item to introduce. So why don't we begin with TE 8.77? I don't see anybody in the chamber, so I guess there are no deputants. I guess we'll start with questions of staff. I have a couple of questions of staff. So first, I'm looking at the recommendation in front of us that City Council authorize and direct the City Clerk to conduct a permit parking poll of the residents on the street listed in Attachment 1 in accordance with the City of Toronto Municipal Code Chapter 190, polling and notification in relation to maintaining or removing permit parking on their street. What I'm curious about, and I don't know who wants to answer this, is there a provision in Chapter 190 to poll for maintaining or removing permit parking? Does such a...
Mr. Chair, explicitly, there is not a provision for that explicitly, no.
No, so the provision is only there to poll for adding it.
That's the way the code chapter is drafted.
That's the way the chapter is drafted. Okay.
You know, just 1 second, Mr. Chair. My advice stands, Mr. Chair.
Your advice stands. Okay, and the decision that Council took last term to implement permit parking on these streets, we did it in accordance with Council procedures and policies.
I believe that to be correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay. So given that there is no provision for polling to do what's asked for here, my understanding is that we would be creating for the first time polling on something on a matter where there is no current provision requiring or creating an option for polling.
Mr. Chair, this is not covered by the code chapter. Council is free to decide something at variance with the chapter.
I understand that, but my question was different. To my memory, I can't think of Council deciding to go and poll on an item that isn't spelled out in one of the bylaws previously. I can't remember an instance. Can anyone else?
No.
No?
Over here does either.
My concern would be that if Council acts on this, where there is no provision, nothing would prevent a member of Council from polling on whether or not we wanted to put in a traffic light or to, I don't know, put in new parking dimensions on a street or any of the various things that we bring from this community council.
Well, again, Mr. Chair, Council, that's up to Council. Council is free to do those things if it wishes.
I understand, okay. Do you have budget for polling on items which are not currently spelled out in our bylaw as requiring polling or having an option for polling?
Well, Mr. Chair, the way the budgeting works is, of course, we never know in any year how many polls are to be conducted, so we do make, there are estimates provided for in the budget. I'm not sure what the total cost of this would be in relation to that budget at the moment, but there are other examples, where council asked for a notice area to be widened and so forth. We follow council's instructions, and council ends up footing the bill for those things. So it's not like something where we, have a budget, and once we run out, we stop issuing notices or we stop issuing polls. We follow council's wishes and deal with it through the budget variance process if we have to.
Right, but the practice has been to develop the estimate based on the existing opportunities for polling. You don't just say, well, maybe council's going to start polling on things that aren't in the code. Your practice has been to develop an estimate based on polling within the code provisions and prior history.
Well, sure, Mr. Chair, what I can say is if council were to broaden a wide range of things on which council was to poll, that would certainly come up in our budget presentation in terms of a pressure.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions of staff? Councillor Bradford?
Thanks very much. Just to the clerk, we were told that the installation of permit parking was done by existing procedures and policies. Is this correct, if there was actually an exemption to the bylaw?
Well, Mr. Chair, the way council adopts bylaws, but council is free also by resolution to adopt things which are at odds with bylaws. So we have many things even on your agenda today. I presume there may be some things there where you're making exemptions to certain provisions. So unless there's some provision in a bylaw that says council may not vary from the bylaw without a supermajority or some other extraordinary procedural roadblock, council is free to do things at odds with its own bylaws.
Is that the case here? No.
I'm not aware that there's
Are there other instances where we make amendments to our policies or procedures to correct previous discrepancies or inconsistencies with our own bylaws? Has that ever happened before?
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure I understand the question.
It's a pretty broad question, but has there ever been an instance when council or community council has gone back and made an amendment or changes to a bylaw to correct something that was carried out previously that was incorrect?
There are lots of examples of council or community council going back and amending a decision previously made, yes?
Okay. Some questions for permit parking, just very quickly. What's the current process to implement permit parking installation?
So the current process under the city's permit parking bylaw, Chapter 925 of the Municipal Code, is where permit parking is currently not available. A petition is to be received, signed by a minimum of 25% of the households on the street. Once that's obtained, then an official city poll is conducted in accordance with Chapter 190, the harmonized polling bylaw.
Okay, so on these streets in particular, when permit parking was installed, were the residents polled in accordance with the bylaw?
The residents on the streets attached to on the listing, attached to the motion, were not polled.
And how often does that happen in the city of Toronto?
It happens occasionally, usually one or two streets at a time for various reasons, but not usually more than one or two.
So in your experience here in the city, you've been doing this job for a while, have you ever seen anything where polling has not been done for residents and introduced at the order of magnitude of 30-plus streets? Has that ever happened before, or would you say that was completely unprecedented?
No, this was the first incident of that type of situation occurring.
So one street, two streets, maybe four streets, but not 32 streets?
Correct.
Would you be opposed to any member of this committee that made a motion to poll residents to permit the installation of permit parking anywhere in TEYCC?
Well, the Division Transportation Services would abide by whatever decision would be made at Community Council or City Council.
And I understand that this language is different. Did you have an opportunity to consult with city legal about the feasibility of conducting this?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Did you have an opportunity to speak with city legal about our ability to make these changes to conduct this poll?
Yes, I did consult with staff and legal to ensure that this was the correct process to follow should Community Council wish to adopt and proceed with polling.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Fletcher.
Just on, someone had asked this, so this is one option. Obviously, there's a new councillor. We're done by a different councillor, and Councillor Bradford's proposing to poll. Does Community Council have the ability simply to remove what was done for the 32 streets without having to go to a poll? Because that was done without talking to anybody, actually.
In order to have put the permit parking in to begin with, an exemption from the bylaw was required and obtained through Community Council and City Council. So if permit parking is to be removed, there is a provision in the permit parking bylaw, Chapter 925, that speaks to removing permit parking. And for that to occur, we need to provide notice through the public notice process. And that usually occurs through direction from the area councillor. So no petition or poll is required, simply direction from the area councillor to remove.
So that is,
It comes here for debate.
But the public notice needs to be provided first, so those objecting, if there are anyone, is anyone objecting, they would have an opportunity to speak before community council.
but in terms of the way that was done, would that, I don't think Councillor Perks had asked you, I think, to clerks about just kind of the precedent of now we're polling on all the decisions that were made previously. Is this a cleaner way to do that, to simply go back, remove that, and give people notice?
Well, Mr. Chair, that's a hard question to answer. Really, I don't know what council's mind is on it. So if the intention is to undo what was done, that seems to me to be a simple way to do that. You know, I'm not entirely clear what the mind of council is with respect to it.
Okay.
Are there any other members who wish to ask questions on this item? Sorry, is this, do you have more questions? No? Okay. Okay, we'll move on to speakers. Councillor Bradford? Your item, you held it.
Okay, well, very quickly, don't want to belabor this anymore, but we had a community meeting on this a few months ago with staff from permit parking and attendance, and based on the feedback from that meeting, as well as numerous emails and phone calls, it's clear that the residents on the streets, included in attachment 1, would like a chance to weigh in on the inclusion of their streets in the permit parking program. As you know, I think all of you were here in 2017. My predecessor moved a motion to exempt the implementation of permit parking on these streets from the requirement of the bylaw and installed permit parking, so without the requirement for a poll indicating community support. You know, I do understand and broadly support the intention of the motion in the permit parking program, but I do think that residents have the right to be consulted. People may not like the process. People might find fault with polling, but the process is the process. And I don't think that community council should just be throwing out the process when it's convenient for them. I think we need to follow the process, and we ought to for our residents. And you know, that's really the intent of this motion. Some streets will choose to keep permit parking. Some streets will choose to remove it. There could be an option to rip it all out in its entirety across these streets and then proceed with the polling process again. But what we're doing is we're streamlining that. We're going to give them the polling process that they were denied, which is the standard process in the City of Toronto, and prior to this, this unprecedented motion to introduce it across 32 streets. I've been listening to the residents. I've worked with staff. I've worked with City Legal. I've worked with parking. They've worked with clerks to arrive at a solution that addresses that issue where permit parking was introduced without the democratic process of the polling that has been the norm in this city and on this community council for decades. Thanks very much. Appreciate your support.
Any questions of the mover? No?
No, I just,
Sure.
it does,
Councillor Fletcher.
and I agree that that was done unilaterally on those 32 streets. But it does seem that that's been put in. Now then, polling is kind of at the back end. And I'm curious as to if you did have a conversation with staff about removing it and then letting those streets that now like it just come in and have a poll on that.
That's why we're doing the poll. This is actually the poll that should have been done in the first place, right? So we're doing the poll that should have been done in the first place.
Yeah, I'm just having, yeah.
Okay, so I'll speak. I'm going to be opposing Councillor Bradford's motion. I understand these kinds of issues in wards, you know, there are differing opinions change, it's always hard. But I think it's kind of incumbent on members of council working in their wards to hear the community and come to a decision. I have never been a fan of the use of polling to try to settle contentious issues in the community. I can remember in my very first term of office trying to eliminate the polling requirements for front yard parking permits. We were having a problem actually in the same area that Councillor Bradford represents. We were getting people coming and making deputations saying, I didn't get my little polling card, or the polling card that was delivered to my address had someone else's name on it. We all know, every one of us knows, because the City of Toronto doesn't maintain a permanent residence or voters list, that the lists that we work off for pollings are often very problematic. We frequently have had to turn things down because the number of cards weren't, you know, the number of returned weren't high enough, even though there was a majority among the ones that were returned. It's a sloppy system, and it's a system, frankly, in my view, which some members of council, not anyone here, but some members of council in the past have used to get around taking the hard decisions in the community. Frankly, if we now do something which the bylaw doesn't permit, which is to allow for polling to remove permit parking, we could find ourselves in a situation much like the Parliament in the United Kingdom right now is facing, where you have your poll, 2 years pass, opinion changes, you have another poll, take it out, and then 2 more years pass, and you poll to put it back in. Frankly, it's a dereliction of the duty that we have as councillors to listen to public opinion, to think of the larger citywide implications of what we're doing, and to make decisions. I shudder at the possibilities if we start to poll on things that aren't laid out in the bylaw. Are we going to start polling for stop signs to go in, and then as soon as there's a complaint, poll for them to come back out? Parking areas around schools? Are we going to be polling on traffic lights? Are we going to start polling on development applications, for goodness sake? It opens up a can of worms that frankly will make our ability to run the business of this community council smoothly and predictably, and with councillors taking responsibility for the positions they have, you know, and standing up in the community and saying, I've heard you, that this is what I'm going to do. Seriously, I cannot imagine what the future will look like if we start just introducing polling anytime some members of the community aren't happy with a decision taken by City Council. Thank you.
I having heard about the remove option, my preference, just taking into account Councillor would like, Councillor Perks is advising, we may end up with these schmozzles where people want to poll for something that we've done, would prefer to cleanly remove those 32 streets because they were done rather quickly, and then allow for that process to install, or however we'd like to do that. Then we don't have the issue of we're polling to undo a bylaw. We are simply removing them back to their original condition. I just think that's cleaner and it's more respectful of the process and any of the dangers that may come up in the future. And I think this is a nitty-gritty one. Personally, I just prefer to put it off and come up with some kind of consensus in October. But if we have to vote on it, I'd like to remove them, the 32 streets. we all heard people say, no one even told me this was going to happen, and I think the test of fairness was not met. So if we wish to meet the test of fairness, then we should remove it. And then, yeah, I'll move that.
Councillor Fletcher is moving an amendment which I assume would be just to remove permit parking on the streets listed in attachment 1?
Yes.
Okay.
And to put it into the normal, the regular process.
Well, then you could do a second thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Councillor Bradford?
Councillor Fletcher, have you had a chance to consult with staff on the motion that you're moving today?
No, but I did hear the clerk say, I believe that that was a possibility to remove.
Did you speak to anyone about the implications of doing that?
No, but if we have those, that's fine.
Did you attend the community meeting where we discussed this with
It-
the streets that were affected?
I don't think it, Counselor, that it's so much that, it's kind of the,
But like, did you?
no, I wasn't there, it's not in my ward. But the implications of polling to remove compared to let's remove it based on how it was implemented, I think is different. Because it's then up to community council to say, without going through all of the effort of polling and giving people, it just seems like a lot. It's a lot of polling, a lot of time, a lot of staff time. This other simply would be remove it, and
Do you
then
have a
the
sense of
streets
how much
that
staff
liked it.
time it is?
I think it's probably quite a bit, because we'll end up.
Did you ask any questions?
No, I didn't.
And you
I
didn't
just-
talk to anyone about it?
Well, no, I just think this is a good compromise, but obviously you don't, and I'm sorry.
I just have a question. So, Councillor Fletcher, if I understand correctly from the answers Mr. Lafretti gave, effectively what you would be, your motion would do, or what your intention would be, is that a notice would be sent out to members of the community and that we would have a future statutory meeting to hear the item. That's the removal process that,
Is that the removal process?
can I just get a head nod from Mr. Lafretti? Yes, that's the removal process. So that would be what
The
you
motion, did you read the motion in front of you, Councillor Fletcher?
Yes.
have-
Yeah, I don't have it, but I have
Oh,
seen it earlier. Council
okay.
Brooks has it right here. Yeah.
So can you just read it back to me, just in relation to maintaining or removing permit parking?
I'm sorry, why don't you tell me where that is, Councillor?
So it's the recommendation that's in front of you.
To conduct a permit parking poll.
Yeah.
And because we don't poll to remove, we.
In relation to maintaining or removing. So we're actually just giving residents the choice.
I think that the point that, if I can, that Councillor Perks has brought up is that that is not something that we normally do.
But we also don't normally unilaterally introduce permit parking across the.
Right.
Do you have a question?
And so what I'm suggesting is that if we unilaterally remove it, we're back to exactly the place where we should be, where there can be this discussion. Because I think that unless we're doing that at a
Okay.
bigger bylaw level, that now we're just complicating what was already
Okay.
done.
Well, given that you've done no work on this item or spoken to anyone about it, I would appreciate community council support in the motion that I brought forward.
So since you're addressing that to me, I will tell you that having heard the advice from staff and their suggestion that that might be an option, I have to look at what I think will be kind of the cleanest option overall. And if you want to defer this one round and work on it,
Nope.
I'm happy to do that too, because I find we can usually get to a good place. But the precedent is of concern. This means we're going back to the normal commoner garden way of doing things, in my opinion.
I guess
That's
it
what
would
I
be
understood.
concerning if you were.
Councillor, I'm going to
I'm
have to
giving you
ask the
my
two of you if this is a portion where you can ask questions of clarification of Councillor Fletcher, and I believe she's clarified her position. Are there any additional questions? No? Okay. Okay, we have to take a little pause while the clerk tries to sort something out. How's your Monday, everybody? Maybe while we're here, do we have Councillor Matlow's motion to introduce? Okay, so there are two items where I need a motion to introduce, TE 8.87 and 8.88. I have a motion to introduce from Councillor Matlow. All those in favor, opposed, carried. Okay, and we'll come to these when we've finished the item we're currently on.
Very good. Very sorry about that. Wasn't it Erskine Avenue? Or Georgia? That little girl, Georgia. Isn't that Erskine? No, it wasn't. It was McCrae over on the. Yeah. In the debut, yeah. Yes.
So basically,
Sorry, who's this letter from? Who's this guy? Don't get into Howard Moscow Church.
That's correct.
what she's after?
Yeah, what's the chai and all that?
So if we could just have the clerk's understanding of Councillor Fletcher's motion up on the screen. Councillor Fletcher, was that your intention?
Not necessarily, but we'd be giving notice.
Yes.
Yeah, when the
And,
reports are made.
and then there's always a report based on what the
Yeah.
statutory. They all come here. Has to be that way.
That's why I think it's better if we defer.
So this, if this doesn't satisfy you, then you can make them, with committee's permission, I can allow you a motion to defer instead if this doesn't satisfy you.
I was just going to read. Yeah, I'm not sure that meets what I was trying to do. I was trying to simply
Okay.
undo what was done quickly, in a quick way.
So you'd
No,
like to withdraw that motion? Okay, permission to withdraw. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. So the only piece we have in front of us, and we noticed and it's appreciated, is the recommendation in Councillor Bradford's letter. All those in favor? All those opposed? Councillor Bailao, did you vote? Do you want to get up and leave, or do you want to vote? No, I'll vote. Okay, in favor or opposed?
We're voting on which motion?
Councillor Bradford's motion. Okay, I'll call it again. All those in favor? All those opposed? Okay, so that carries. So item TE 8.78,
Add 87 and.
we did. We added them while you were.
Oh.
Yeah, we got ahead of you there. Ha! I was ahead of the clerk. I feel so proud. Item 8.87, Ossington Avenue Bar and Restaurant Study. Councillor Cressy.
I'd like to move the recommendations in my letter.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Item 8.88, request for city staff to develop a comprehensive construction traffic safety management plan in the Young Eglinton area. Councillor Matlow.
So first of all, I'll move, obviously, the recommendations in my letter to you, and I'll just speak to this for a moment, if I may. So as all of us, I imagine, have been made aware of, there was a woman named Evangeline LaRosa who was struck and killed by a driver of a concrete truck at the corner of Yonge and Erskine. And she was in her mid-50s, she a caregiver to a couple of children in the area. And what I understand from her friends is that she had just dropped these children off and she was on her way back. And that's when the tragedy occurred. And there were a couple of things that came to all of our minds at that time. One is that if you're driving in our city, whether it be a concrete truck or anywhere else, in any type of vehicle, when people are walking in front of you or alongside you on the street, they're not just obstructions or obstacles for you to get to where you're trying to get to. They are most importantly people who are loved by other people. These are people's moms and sisters and brothers and children and family members. And if anything ever happened to them, somebody like Evangeline's family are going to miss them terribly. And I just wonder, as drivers, if we would change our behavior if we saw that individual like somebody who we loved and who is a member of our family. We've had this conversation over and over and over again, and when you go to a vigil and you meet the sister of somebody who was just killed so horrifically, and I'm going to spare you the details, there are no words. There are no words except that we have to do better as a city to make improvements. You're going to see a number of recommendations in this letter that Councillor Cole has also moved at North York Community Council simultaneously to make improvements to areas like Yonge and Eglinton, and in this case Yonge and Eglinton, where it's an urban growth center under enormous pressure, and there is aggravation, and there are challenges that just naturally come along with such a high intensification of development, along with the crosstown being built all at the same time in one place. I also would add that we need to do more with our Vision Zero initiative, both on the enforcement side, because there's a dearth of police enforcement within our police divisions, and then on the investment side of actually moving forward with redesign and reconfiguration of our roads to make them safer. And I think there is more we can do and have to do based on the principles of initiatives around the world that we just need to catch up to. I wanted to add, along with these initiatives, this happened in Councillor Robinson's ward at the corner of Yonge and Erskine, near John Fisher. And I just want to acknowledge that Councillor Robinson has been incredibly responsive to her community, incredibly caring, has done a lot of work on this. And I just want to say that for the record, because while we're going to do what we can do here at Toronto East York, supporting the work of North York, I think it's really important to recognize the local councillor and her community who've just been through a tragedy and be there as a team there in Midtown, but all of us together as a council to support each other in our communities when we go through something like this. And may we never have to go through this again, and may we do the work that needs to be done to avoid this from ever occurring again. Thank you.
Councillor Bailão?
Councillor, I sympathize with what your community must be going through and everybody around that area. I'm just wondering, and I'll check with staff as well, but given that this affects 2 community councils, and to be honest with you, that I think we need to look at this in all parts of the city that are going through some pressures, shouldn't this be at Planning and Housing Committee? Shouldn't this be something that actually the Planning and Housing Committee tomorrow should be dealing with?
When I was made, I'm going to say this candidly, but as a move forward, when I was made aware that something might be coming at North York Community Council from Councillor Cole, it seemed appropriate that both community councils would be working together in concert. Where we go at council to perhaps bring them together.
So you wouldn't oppose that actually we take more of a look at this and then citywide and maybe this eventually will report to planning?
I would actually argue, as I'm hearing you would, that there are areas certainly in the downtown core, North York and elsewhere that should receive the same type of attention. But this is a way to sort of bring it forward in response to a clear community demand, but certainly whatever the process is to make sure that it's not just in writing and in speeches, but that we as a city invest our time and finances into the right solution, along with what we need to do on the ground that's within our bailiwick, but also there are some things that we still need the provincial government to allow us to do. I would support that.
But I think we're on the same page.
I think we're going in the right direction, yeah.
Okay.
And I think we can sort this out as the staff reports move forward.
We're not, yeah.
Yeah. Anyone else? No? Okay. All those in favor? All those opposed? That carries, and I think that takes us to the bills.
Yes, it does.
Councillor Wong Tam, you have a motion.
Yes, I do. That the Toronto and East Shore Community Council pass and declare as bylaw bills 1230 to 1246, 1248 to 1249, 1254 to 1258, and 1260 to 1269, prepared for the September 16, 2019 meeting 8 of the Community Council.
All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Councillor Bradford, you have a motion.
Mr. Chair, that the Toronto East York Community Council pass and declare as bylaw a confirmatory bill to confirm the legislation proceedings of Toronto and East York Community Council acting under delegated authority at meeting 8, September 16, 2019.
All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. That concludes our business. Thank you all very much. Have a great rest of your day.